The throttles were wide open, 82 knots, 3 German E-boats closing from starboard. My PT-109 sister ship had just exploded 200 yards behind us. I could see the flames reflecting off the black water. Philippines, January 1945. The torpedoes were armed. We had maybe 40 seconds before they'd be in gun range. Nobody told us we'd be mounting Mark 13 submarine torpedoes on plywood boats. Nobody explained how a 20-foot torpedo designed for a steel submarine would handle when fired from an 80-foot PT boat doing 60 knots in a hard turn. We figured it out the hard way. The Germans started calling us the Schwarze Haie, black sharks. We earned that name in blood and burning oil. The doctrine said PT boats were for reconnaissance and harassment. Fast in, fast out, don't engage unless you have overwhelming advantage. I did the opposite that night. What happened next changed everything I thought I knew about naval warfare, changed everything I thought I knew about myself. My name's Frank Sullivan. I was 21 years old, Sergeant 77th Squadron, Motor Torpedo Boat Squadron. Before the war, I worked the lobster boats off Sheepshead Bay in Brooklyn. My old man ran a fishing charter, taught me engines, taught me how to read water in the dark, taught me that sometimes you go toward the danger instead of away from it. That last lesson almost got me killed more times than I can count. The Mark 13 weighed over 2,000 pounds. Our PT boats were built from plywood and mahogany, 80 feet long, displacing 45 tons when fully loaded, 4 Packard engines putting out 6,000 horsepower total. We could hit 50 knots in calm water. In a following sea, with those engines screaming, we'd done 65. The boat would skip across the wave tops like a stone. Your teeth would rattle. Your kidneys would ache for days afterward. They mounted those submarine torpedoes in pairs on our deck. 2 tubes, 1 on each side. The torpedoes stuck out past the beam, made us less maneuverable, made us top-heavy. First time we test-fired one, the recoil nearly capsized us. The explosion of compressed air, the weight shift, the boat rolling 20 degrees to port. Our skipper, Lieutenant Morrison, came out of the wheelhouse white as a sheet. We all thought we were going over. But once we learned to compensate, once we learned to fire in a turn with the weight shift helping us instead of fighting us, we became something the Japanese and Germans hadn't planned for. We were submarines that moved at 60 knots on the surface. We were destroyers small enough to hide behind islands. We were ghosts that appeared out of the darkness with 4,000 pounds of high explosive and disappeared before the enemy could react. The night everything changed started quiet. Too quiet. We were running a patrol route off Leyte Gulf. 4 boats in formation. PT-109, PT-117, PT-131, and us, PT-142. Morrison was skipper. I was senior enlisted, in charge of the torpedo crew. My team was 3 guys. Eddie Kowalski from Chicago worked in his uncle's machine shop before the war. Ray Chen from San Francisco, his family had a commercial fishing operation before they got sent to the internment camps. And Tommy Reeves from somewhere in Oklahoma, farm kid who could fix anything with wire and a wrench. The water was like glass, no moon, overcast sky. You could smell the jungle from 5 miles out. That thick, rotting vegetation smell mixed with smoke from cooking fires on the islands. The engines were throttled back to just above idle. We were trying to be quiet, trying to listen. Ray heard them first. He had the best ears of any of us. He was on the forward gun, the 37mm cannon we'd mounted where the original 20mm had been. He held up his fist. Stop signal. Morrison cut the engines to idle. We drifted. The sound of water against the hull was loud in the sudden quiet. Then I heard it too. Diesel engines. Deep throb. Not Japanese. Wrong sound. These were German engines. E-boats. Fast attack craft. What the Germans called Schnellboote. They were operating in the Pacific now, training Japanese crews, running special operations. We'd heard reports but hadn't encountered them directly. Morrison's voice was quiet. Count them. We listened. The sound was coming from the north, behind the island we'd been using as cover. I counted the engine rhythms. 3 distinct sources. 3 boats, I said. Maybe 4. Eddie was already at the torpedo tubes, checking the arming mechanisms in the dark by feel. He'd done it 1,000 times. Ray stayed on the 37mm. Tommy moved to the twin 50 caliber mount aft. Morrison studied the chart with a red-lensed flashlight, his hand cupped over it so the light wouldn't escape. The E-boats were faster than us in a straight line, 90 knots in calm water. They had 20mm and 40mm cannons. They had armor. We had plywood and gasoline. But they didn't know we were here, and they didn't know what we were carrying. Morrison made the call. We engage. The other 3 PT boats acknowledged with radio clicks. The plan was simple. We'd split up. 2 boats would draw them out. 2 boats would ambush from behind the island. We were one of the ambush boats. PT-109 and PT-1I-17 fired up their engines and roared north, making noise, making themselves visible. The E-boats took the bait. We heard the pitch of their engines change as they accelerated. Heard the first gunfire. Tracers lit up the sky, red and green lines crisscrossing in the darkness. We waited. PT-142 and PT-131 drifted in the shadow of the island. Morrison had his hand on the throttles. I was behind the starboard torpedo tube, my hand on the firing mechanism. My heart was hammering. My mouth was dry. I could feel the deck vibrating slightly under my feet from the idling engines. The E-boats came around the southern tip of the island at full speed. They were chasing PT-109 and PT-117. They hadn't seen us. They were maybe 300 yards away, close enough that I could see the bow wave, the white water curling away from their hulls. Morrison didn't wait. He slammed the throttles forward. All 4 Packards roared. The PT boat leaped forward like a scared horse. The acceleration pushed me back against the bulkhead. We went from 5 knots to 40 knots in about 8 seconds. The deck tilted up. The bow lifted. Water sprayed everywhere. We came out of the shadow of the island at an angle, cutting across the E-boat's course. PT-131 was doing the same thing on the other side. The Germans saw us. I saw their forward guns swing toward us. The first rounds went high, tracers streaking over the wheelhouse. "Fire one!" Morrison yelled. I pulled the starboard torpedo release. The compressed air cannon fired. The recoil was tremendous. The whole boat lurched to port. The torpedo dropped into the water with a splash. The propeller caught. The wake appeared behind it. I watched it track away from us. Straight line. The Germans saw it coming. The lead E-boat tried to turn. Too late. Too close. The explosion lit up the entire area. A column of water and fire shot up maybe 60 feet. The E-boat disappeared. Just gone. Burning fuel spread across the water. The other 2 E-boats split up, one going left, one going right. We were between them. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. Morrison threw us into a hard turn to port. The second E-boat was coming straight at us. Ray opened up with the 37 millimeters. The shells walked across the water toward them. I saw hits on their hull, sparks. But they were armored. Our rounds weren't penetrating. They fired back. A 40-millimeter round hit our stern. The explosion threw Tommy into the air. He landed hard on the deck. Didn't move. Eddie was screaming something. I couldn't hear him over the engines and gunfire. He was pointing at the port torpedo. I understood. Morrison brought us around in a turn so tight I thought we'd flip. The G-forces pulled at me. Water was coming over the side. Eddie had the port torpedo aimed at the oncoming E-boat. Range was maybe 100 yards. Point blank for a torpedo. "Fire 2!" I pulled the mechanism. The torpedo launched. The boat rolled hard to starboard this time. The deck was slick with water and blood. I went down on one knee. The torpedo ran hot and true. The E-boat tried to turn. Not enough time. Not enough room. The second explosion was even bigger than the first. The E-boat must have been carrying extra fuel or ammunition. It came apart. The bow section went one way, the stern another. Men were in the water, burning, screaming. I'd never heard sounds like that before. The third E-boat had broken off. It was running. PT-109 and PT-117 were coming back, their engines wide open. PT-131 was circling around. We'd won. We'd sunk 2 E-boats, fast attack craft that were supposed to be superior to anything we had. We'd done it with submarine torpedoes on plywood boats. Morrison cut the engines back. We drifted through the debris field. There were men in the water. Germans. Some were dead. Some were alive, swimming, crying out in German. Morrison looked at me. I looked at Eddie. Ray came down from the forward gun. We were all thinking the same thing. The doctrine said we didn't take prisoners. We didn't have the space. We didn't have the supplies. We were supposed to leave them. But these were men. Drowning, burning. I remembered my father's words. You don't leave a man in the water, you just don't. We pulled 3 Germans out, 2 were wounded, 1 was burned bad. We got them on deck, used our medical supplies on them. One of them, a young kid maybe 19 years old, kept saying "Danke" over and over. Thank you. His hands were shaking. His eyes were wide. He looked exactly like my younger brother back in Brooklyn. Tommy was dead. The 40-millimeter round had hit him directly. There wasn't much we could do. We wrapped him in a tarp, said a prayer. Eddie was crying. Ray just stared at the deck. Morrison stood at the helm, his jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth would break. We rendezvoused with the other boats. PT-117 had taken damage, but no casualties. PT-109 was fine. PT-131 had 2 wounded from shell fragments. We'd lost 1 man and gained 3 prisoners. We'd sunk 2 E-boats with submarine torpedoes fired from PT boats. The first confirmed kills of German fast attack craft in the Pacific Theater. The trip back to base took 4 hours. The sky started to lighten. Dawn came slow over the water. The Germans sat on our deck under guard, drinking coffee from our thermos. The burned one was in shock. We did what we could for him. He died about an hour before we reached base. We buried him at sea. Said another prayer. When we pulled into harbor, there were officers waiting. Lots of them. Morrison went ashore to make his report. The rest of us secured the boat, cleaned the blood off the deck, checked the engines for damage. Eddie found the hole where the 40mm had hit. It had gone through the planking, through the fuel tank, and lodged in the engine mount. If it had been 6 inches to the left, we'd have exploded. 6 inches. The news spread fast. Schwarze Hai, black sharks. The Germans had been radio chatter about us before they got hit. They'd been warning each other about fast attack boats with torpedoes. They thought we were suicide boats, like the Japanese kamikazes. They didn't realize we had no intention of dying. We intended to kill them and go home. The Navy loved it. Finally, some good news. Finally, the PT boats were proving they could do more than reconnaissance. Finally, we had a weapon system that worked. They wanted more. More boats, more torpedoes, more attacks. But Morrison pulled me aside after the debriefing. We were standing on the dock smoking cigarettes, watching the sun come up fully now. He said, "Sullivan, we got lucky. That turn, that second shot, that was pure luck. They outgun us. They're faster. They've got armor. We've got plywood and prayers." I said, "We've got something they don't." "What's that?" "We're willing to get closer." Morrison looked at me for a long time. Then he nodded. "Yeah, we are." Over the next 3 months, we ran 18 more missions with the Mark 13 torpedoes. We sank 4 more E-boats. We sank 6 Japanese destroyers. We sank 2 supply ships. We damaged countless others. We lost 2 PT boats from our squadron. 14 men killed, 23 wounded. The Schwarze Hai reputation spread. Japanese and German radio operators would warn each other when they thought we were in the area. They started avoiding certain channels and routes. They started traveling in larger groups with more escorts. We'd become something they feared, but the cost was high. Every mission, we knew some of us might not come back. Every time we armed those torpedoes, we knew the recoil might capsize us. Every time we closed a firing range, we knew their guns could tear our boats apart. Ray Chen was killed in March 1945. E-boat ambush off Mindanao. He never saw it coming. Eddie Kowalski lost his left arm when a fuel tank exploded in April. He survived but never went back out. Morrison was promoted to lieutenant commander and transferred to training duty. He'd had enough of watching men die. I stayed on. New crews rotated in, new faces, young faces. I taught them what I knew: how to read water in the dark, how to listen to engines, how to fire a submarine torpedo from a boat that wasn't meant to carry it, how to get close enough to kill before they killed you. The war ended in August. I was still in the Philippines when we got the news. Japan had surrendered. It was over. We'd won. Men were crying, laughing, firing guns in the air. I sat on the deck of PT-142, my boat, the boat I'd served on for almost 2 years, and I felt nothing. Empty. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. I came home to Brooklyn in October 1945. My father met me at the dock. He looked older, smaller. He hugged me, and I couldn't hug him back. Everything felt distant, wrong. The city was celebrating. Parades, parties. Everyone wanted to buy you drinks, shake your hand, hear your stories. I couldn't tell them. How could I explain what it felt like to watch a man burn in the water? How could I explain the sound of Tommy hitting the deck? How could I explain that we pulled Germans out of the water and gave them coffee while one of our own was wrapped in a tarp 5 feet away? I went back to the lobster boats. The smell of diesel fuel made me sick. The sound of the engine made me sick. I lasted 2 weeks before I quit. My father didn't understand. Nobody understood. I tried different jobs, factory work, construction, deliveries. Nothing stuck. I drank too much. I got in fights. I didn't sleep. When I did sleep, I dreamed about black water and red tracers and men screaming in German. It took me years to figure out what was wrong with me. Decades, really. They didn't call it PTSD back then. They called it shell shock or battle fatigue or just being weak. I wasn't weak. I was carrying things I couldn't put down. I met my wife in 1952, Sarah. She worked in a diner in Queens. I'd go in there for coffee and she'd talk to me. Just talk. About normal things, weather, baseball, her family. She never asked about the war, never pushed. One day I started telling her, just little pieces. She listened, didn't judge, didn't try to fix me, just listened. We got married in 1953, had 3 kids, 2 boys and a girl. I worked as a mechanic, good with engines, remember? I never went back on the water, couldn't do it, but I could fix engines. That was enough. I didn't talk about the war for 40 years, didn't tell my kids, didn't go to reunions, didn't keep in touch with anyone from the squadron. I wanted to forget. I needed to forget. But you don't forget. You just learn to live with it. In 1995, I got a letter from Eddie Kowalski. He'd tracked me down somehow. He was living in Arizona. He'd become a teacher, taught shop class. He said he'd been thinking about the old days, about Ray, about Tommy, about Morrison, about me. He said he understood why I'd stayed away. He said he'd done the same thing, but he said it was time to stop running. We started writing letters, then phone calls. Then he came to visit. We sat in my garage, drinking beer, and we talked. Really talked. For the first time in 50 years, I told someone who understood what it had been like. The fear, the adrenaline, the guilt, the pride, all of it mixed together in a way that never made sense. Eddie told me he'd looked up the records. Our squadron, the 77th, had sunk more enemy vessels than any other PT boat squadron in the Pacific. We'd pioneered the use of submarine torpedoes on fast attack craft. The tactics we'd developed were taught at Annapolis. The Schwartz-Hay had become part of naval history. He told me about Ray's family. They'd been given reparations for the internment camps. Ray's younger sister had become a doctor. She named her son Raymond, after her brother, after our Ray. He told me about Tommy Reeves from Oklahoma. His family had gotten a telegram, killed in action, Purple Heart. They'd buried an empty casket in a cemetery in Tulsa. Tommy was still in the Pacific, at the bottom of Leyte Gulf, wrapped in a tarp on the deck of a PT boat that we'd scuttled after the engine damage couldn't be repaired. I asked Eddie why he'd reached out after all these years. He said, "Because I'm dying, Frank. Cancer. Couple months left, they say. And I didn't want to go without telling someone that it mattered. What we did, who we were. I didn't want it to just disappear." Eddie died in January 1996. I went to the funeral, met his wife, his kids, his students. They knew who I was. Eddie had told them. The sergeant from the PT boats, the guy who taught him how to arm a Mark 13 in the dark, the guy who'd pulled Germans out of the water. At the funeral, one of his former students, a kid maybe 20 years old, came up to me. He said, "Mr. Kowalski talked about you a lot. He said you taught him that courage isn't about not being scared. It's about doing the right thing even when you're terrified." I didn't remember saying that, but it sounded like something I would have said back then, when I was young and stupid and thought I knew what courage meant. After Eddie's funeral, something changed in me. I started going to the VA, started talking to a counselor, started dealing with things I'd buried for 50 years. It was hard, harder than the war in some ways, but it helped. I started writing things down, memories, stories, not for publication, just for myself, to get them out of my head and onto paper where I could look at them, where I could make sense of them. I wrote about that night in January 1945, the 3 E-boats, the explosions, Tommy's death, the Germans in the water, the choice we made. I wrote about what Morrison said to me on the dock, about getting lucky, about getting close. I realized something while I was writing. Morrison was wrong. It wasn't luck. And it wasn't about getting close. It was about being willing to make impossible choices in impossible situations. It was about living with those choices afterward. That was the real courage. We'd mounted submarine torpedoes on plywood boats because someone thought it might work. We'd closed to point-blank range with enemy warships because that was the only way the torpedoes would hit. We'd pulled drowning Germans out of the water because leaving them there wasn't something we could live with. We'd watched our friends die because that's what happened in war. And then we'd come home, and we'd tried to forget, and we'd failed, and we'd learned that you don't forget. You carry it forever. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. I'm 81 years old now. My wife passed in 2003. My kids are grown with kids of their own. I live in a small house in Long Island. I can see the water from my back deck, not the bay where my father had his charter boat. Different water, but it's the same ocean. Eventually, it all connects. I still dream about it sometimes. The black water, the red tracers, the sound of the Packards at full throttle, the feel of the deck under my feet as we made that impossible turn, the face of that young German kid saying "Danke" with his hands shaking. But now, when I wake up, I don't feel empty anymore. I feel something else. Not peace, exactly, but understanding, acceptance. I did what I had to do. We all did. We were kids playing at war with weapons that could kill us as easily as the enemy. We were terrified and brave and stupid and smart all at the same time. The Schwarze Hai, black sharks. The Germans were right to fear us, not because we were better sailors or better fighters, but because we were willing to do what they wouldn't. Get close, take risks, make impossible choices, live with the consequences. I got a call last month from a historian writing a book about PT boats in the Pacific. He'd found my name in the records. He wanted to interview me. I said yes. For the first time in 70 years, I said yes. We talked for 3 hours. I told him about the Mark 13 torpedoes, about the night we sank the E-boats, about Morrison and Eddie and Ray and Tommy, about the Germans we pulled from the water, about the choices we made, about the cost of those choices. He asked me if I had any regrets. I thought about it for a long time. Then I told him the truth. I regret that it had to happen at all. I regret the men we lost. I regret the men we killed. I regret that the world was broken in a way that required 21-year-old kids to mount submarine torpedoes on plywood boats and go hunt warships in the dark. But I don't regret what we did. Given the same situation, the same choices, the same impossible odds, I'd do it again. Because that's what courage is, not the absence of fear, not the absence of doubt, but the willingness to act despite both. The historian asked me one more question. He asked me why the Schwarze Hai worked when so many other PT boat tactics failed, why submarine torpedoes on fast attack craft became a legitimate naval strategy when it seemed crazy on paper. I told him what Morrison told me on that dock in January 1945, what I finally understood after 70 years of carrying it. We were willing to get closer, not just physically closer to the enemy, but emotionally closer. To the truth of what war is, to the reality of what we were doing, to the consequences of our choices. Other PT boat crews treated their missions as hit-and-run operations. Get in, fire from maximum range, get out, stay safe. We did the opposite. We closed to point-blank range. We looked the enemy in the eye. We made sure. And because we got that close, because we were willing to take that risk, we were effective. But getting that close meant seeing things you can't unsee. It meant making choices you can't unmake. It meant living with memories that never fade. That was the real cost. Not the boats we lost or the men who died, but what the survivors carried for the rest of their lives. The historian thanked me for my time. He said the interview would be in his book. He said my story needed to be told. I told him I wasn't sure about that. I told him there were a lot of guys who did a lot more than me, who were braver, smarter, better. He said that wasn't the point. The point was that someone needed to tell the truth about what it was really like, about the reality behind the legends. After he left, I sat on my back deck and watched the sun set over the water. The waves were gentle. The sky was orange and pink, peaceful. I thought about that night in January 1945, the black water, the explosions, the choices we made. I thought about Tommy Reeves, wrapped in a tarp, buried at sea somewhere in Leyte Gulf. I thought about Ray Chen, who never got to see his family reunited after the camps. I thought about Eddie Kowalski, who spent his last years teaching shop class in Arizona and thinking about the kid from Brooklyn who'd taught him how to arm a torpedo in the dark. I thought about Morrison, who'd made the call to engage when doctrine said to run, who'd lived with that decision for the rest of his life, who'd promoted to commander and spent the rest of the war teaching other kids how to do what we'd done, who'd died in 1987 without ever talking about it publicly. And I thought about that young German kid, the one who said "Danke" with shaking hands, the one who looked like my younger brother. I wondered if he made it home, if he had a family, if he told his kids about the Americans who pulled him out of the burning water and gave him coffee while their own dead lay 5 feet away. I wondered if he carried it the way I carried it, the weight of surviving when others didn't, the guilt and the pride all mixed together, the impossible complexity of being human in inhuman circumstances. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. The sun finished setting. The water turned dark, black water, like that night, but quieter, calmer. The war was over, had been for 70 years. But in some ways, it never ends. Not for the people who lived through it, not for the people who made choices they can never unmake. I'm telling this story now because Eddie was right. It matters, not because we were heroes, not because we did something extraordinary, but because we were ordinary people put in extraordinary circumstances. We were kids from Brooklyn and Chicago and San Francisco and Oklahoma. We had no business being in the Pacific Ocean in plywood boats with submarine torpedoes strapped to the deck. But there we were, and we did what we had to do. We fought, we survived, some of us. We made choices, some good, some bad, all of them heavy, and we carried those choices for the rest of our lives. The Schwarze, Black Sharks, we earned that name. But what the Germans didn't know, what nobody knew except us, was that the sharks were just as scared as the people they were hunting. We were predators and prey at the same time, dangerous and vulnerable, powerful and fragile. That's what war is, really. Not glory, not honor, not heroism, just people trying to survive, trying to do the right thing, trying to make sense of circumstances that don't make sense, trying to live with choices that haunt them forever. I'm 81 years old. I've lived a good life, a long life, longer than Tommy or Ray, longer than a lot of guys from the squadron. I've had a wife I loved, kids I'm proud of, grandkids who make me laugh, a house by the water, enough money to be comfortable, good health mostly. But I still carry January 1945. I still carry the feel of the torpedo firing mechanism under my hand, the sound of the explosion, the sight of men in the burning water, the choice to pull them out or leave them there, the weight of Tommy wrapped in a tarp. I carry it because forgetting would be a betrayal. Forgetting would mean they died for nothing. It would mean the choices we made didn't matter. It would mean the cost we paid was meaningless. So I remember, I carry it, and now I'm telling you, because Eddie was right. The memories need to be told, not to glorify war, not to make heroes out of scared kids, but to preserve the truth, to honor the cost, to make sure it's not forgotten. The Schwarze existed for about 8 months in 1945. 4 PT boat squadrons equipped with Mark 13 submarine torpedoes, operating in the Philippines, hunting enemy warships in the dark, getting close, taking risks, paying costs. We sank 37 enemy vessels, destroyers, E-boats, supply ships. We damaged dozens more. We changed naval tactics. We proved that speed and surprise could overcome armor and firepower. We became something the enemy feared, but more importantly, we became something we had to learn to live with. We became men who'd seen and done things that changed us forever. We became carriers of memories that were too heavy to share and too important to forget. That's why I'm telling this story now. Not for glory, not for recognition, but because someone needs to say what it was really like. Someone needs to tell the truth about the Schwarze, about the submarine torpedoes on plywood boats, about the kids who went to war and came back as something different. I'm telling this story for Tommy, who never came back at all, for Ray, who came back but couldn't stay, for Eddie, who came back and spent 50 years trying to forget before finally deciding to remember, for Morrison, who came back and spent the rest of his life teaching other kids how to survive. And I'm telling this story for that young German kid with the shaking hands, for the men in the burning water, for everyone who was there and everyone who wasn't, for the people who need to understand that war isn't what you see in movies or read in books. War is impossible choices in the dark. It's submarine torpedoes on plywood boats. It's getting close enough to see the enemy's face and pulling the trigger anyway. It's pulling drowning men out of the water even though your own friend is dead 5 feet away. It's carrying all of it for the rest of your life. That's what the Schwarze were. That's what we did. That's what I carry. The water is dark now. Full night. The stars are out. Same stars that were out that night in January 1945. Same ocean. Different time. Different man. But the memory is the same. I'm 81 years old. I was 21 then. 60 years. More than half a century. But when I close my eyes, I'm back there. The throttle's wide open. 3 E-boats closing. The torpedo firing. The explosion. The burning water. The choices. Always the choices. That's what I want you to understand. If you take nothing else from this story, understand that. War is choices. And you carry those choices forever. The Schwarze, Black Sharks. We were dangerous. We were effective, we were feared, but we were also just kids. Scared kids, doing what we thought was right, hoping we'd survive, trying to make sense of something that didn't make sense. And when it was over, when we came home, we carried it, all of it, the good and the bad, the pride and the guilt, the victories and the losses. We carried it because that was the cost. That was the price of being willing to get close, of being willing to make impossible choices, of being willing to do what needed to be done. I'm telling you this now because that price needs to be understood, because the next generation needs to know what war really costs, not just in lives lost, but in lives changed, in memories that never fade, in choices that echo forever. The Schwarze were effective because we were willing to pay that price. We were successful because we were willing to carry the cost. But I want you to know that the cost was real. It wasn't abstract. It wasn't theoretical. It was men screaming in burning water. It was Tommy hitting the deck. It was that German kid shaking hands. It was 50 years of nightmares and 3 failed marriages before I found Sarah, and 70 years of carrying weight that never got lighter. That was the cost of the Schwarze. That was the price of mounting submarine torpedoes on plywood boats and hunting warships in the dark. And I paid it. We all paid it. Every one of us who served on those boats. This is my testimony. This is my truth. This is what it was really like. The Schwarze, January 1945. Black water and red tracers and impossible choices. This is what I carry. This is what I'll carry until I die. And now you know it too, because Eddie was right. The memories can't be forgotten. The cost can't be ignored. The truth needs to be told, so I'm telling it. For all of us. For everyone who was there. For everyone who needs to understand. This was the price. This was the cost. This is what it means to be willing to get close. Remember it. Honor it. Learn from it. That's all I ask. The Schwarze. We were there. We did it. We survived it. And we carried it. Forever. But let me tell you more. Let me tell you about the beginning. About how a kid from Brooklyn who'd never fired a gun ended up on a plywood boat with submarine torpedoes in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Because that story matters too. Because understanding where we came from helps you understand what we became. I was born in 1923, Sheepshead Bay, Brooklyn. My father, Patrick Sullivan, ran a fishing charter out of a small dock near the bay. My mother, Mary, worked as a seamstress. We lived in a 3-room apartment above a bakery. The smell of bread baking would wake us up every morning at 5. I can still smell it sometimes, 70 years later, and I can still smell that bread. I had 2 younger brothers, Michael and Danny. Michael wanted to be a priest. Danny wanted to play baseball for the Dodgers. I wanted to work on the boats with my father. That was my whole world. The water, the engines, the smell of diesel fuel and salt air and fish. I thought I'd do that forever. Take over the charter when my father got too old. Raise my own kids in Brooklyn. Die in the same neighborhood where I was born. Then December 7th, 1941 happened. I was 18 years old, working on the boat with my father when we heard the news on the radio. Pearl Harbor, Japanese attack, thousands dead. War was coming. Everyone knew it. My father didn't say anything for a long time. He just kept working on the engine, his hands black with grease, his jaw set. Finally, he looked at me and said, "You're going to go, aren't you?" I said yes. He nodded, said, "Then I'm going to teach you everything I know. You're going to need it." For the next 3 months, before I enlisted, my father taught me things he'd never taught me before. How to read water in complete darkness by sound alone. How to feel the difference between good engine vibration and bad. How to navigate by the stars when your compass failed. How to stay calm when everything was going wrong. How to make decisions when there was no time to think. He never said he was preparing me for war. Never talked about it directly. But I knew. And he knew I knew. We worked on that boat 14 hours a day, 7 days a week. He was giving me everything he could to keep me alive. I enlisted in March 1942. Navy. I wanted to be on the water. That's all I knew. They sent me to boot camp in Great Lakes, Illinois. I'd never been out of New York before, never been away from the ocean. Illinois felt wrong, flat, empty, no salt in the air. Boot camp was 8 weeks. They taught us to march, to salute, to follow orders, to shoot rifles, to swim in full gear, to fight hand to hand, to survive. I was good at most of it. The physical stuff came easy. I'd been working on boats my whole life. I was strong, fast, coordinated. But the shooting surprised me. I'd never fired a gun before enlisting. My father didn't hunt. We didn't have guns in the house. The first time they put a rifle in my hands at the range, I was terrified. The weight of it, the noise, the kick against my shoulder. I missed every target in the first round. The instructor, a chief petty officer named Williams, pulled me aside. He said, "Sullivan, you scared of that rifle?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Good. You should be. It's a tool for killing. If you're not scared of it, you're stupid. But being scared and being unable are 2 different things. You need to learn the difference." He spent extra time with me, after hours, taught me to breathe, to squeeze instead of pull, to accept the recoil instead of fighting it. By the end of boot camp, I was scoring in the top 10%, not because I was a natural, but because I was willing to learn, willing to be scared and do it anyway. They asked me what I wanted to do after boot camp. I said boats, small boats, fast boats. They looked at my scores, my background, my physical capabilities. They said, "We've got something for you. Motor torpedo boats. Interested?" I said yes without knowing what I was agreeing to. They sent me to PT boat training in Melville, Rhode Island. That's where I first saw them. The PT boats. 80 feet of plywood and mahogany and brass and chrome. 4 massive Packard engines. Twin 50 caliber machine guns. Depth charges. Torpedo tubes. They were beautiful, sleek, dangerous, fast. The first time I felt one at full throttle, I understood. This wasn't like my father's charter boat. This wasn't a fishing vessel or a cargo ship. This was something else. This was speed and violence and precision all wrapped together. This was a weapon that you rode instead of fired. Training was 4 months. They taught us everything. How to maintain the engines, how to navigate at night without lights, how to communicate by radio in code, how to fire the torpedoes, how to lay depth charges, how to fight surface actions with the deck guns, how to survive when everything went wrong. We trained on Narragansett Bay. The water was cold, gray, nothing like the Pacific we'd eventually fight in. But the principles were the same: speed, stealth, surprise, hit hard, hit fast, get out before they could hit back. I met Morrison during training. Lieutenant James Morrison from Portland, Maine. He was 25 years old, Naval Academy graduate, smart, calm, didn't yell, didn't panic, the kind of officer who made you want to follow him because he knew what he was doing, not because of the rank on his collar. He pulled me aside after a training exercise where I'd made a decision that violated doctrine but got better results. We'd been practicing torpedo runs against a simulated target. The doctrine said approach from the beam, fire from 1,000 yards, turn away immediately. I'd approached from the stern, closed to 500 yards, fired, and stayed on course to confirm the hit. Morrison said, "Sullivan, you just violated about 6 different regulations." I said, "Yes, sir, but I got the hit." He said, "The regulations exist for a reason. They keep you alive." I said, "The regulations assume the enemy is predictable. What if they're not?" He looked at me for a long time. Then he smiled. It was a small smile, barely there, but I saw it. He said, "What if they're not? That's the question, isn't it?" He walked away. I didn't know it then, but that conversation was the beginning of something. Morrison was looking for people who could think, who could adapt, who could make decisions in the moment. He was looking for his crew. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. I graduated training in November 1942. Top of my class in gunnery and seamanship. Middle of the pack in academics. I was never good with books, but I was good with boats, good with engines, good with making decisions under pressure. They gave us our assignments. Most guys were going to the Pacific, some to the Atlantic, some to the Mediterranean. I got orders for the Pacific. PT Boat Squadron 77, based out of Tulagi in the Solomon Islands. I was going to war. The trip took 3 weeks. We went by transport ship, across the Atlantic, through the Panama Canal, across the Pacific. It was December 1942 when we arrived. The battle for Guadalcanal was still going on. You could hear the artillery from the ship, see the smoke from the fires. We were scared. All of us. Young guys. Most of us had never been in combat. We'd trained. We'd practiced. We'd imagined. But we didn't know. Not really. You can't know until you're there. Until it's real. Until people are trying to kill you and you're trying to kill them back. Squadron 77 had 12 PT boats. We were replacements. The squadron had been operating since August. They'd lost 4 boats already. 16 men killed. 23 wounded. The crews that were left looked tired. Older than their age. They'd seen things. Done things. Survived things. I was assigned to PT 142. Morrison was the skipper. We had a crew of 12. Morrison and a junior officer named Jameson. 10 enlisted men. I was one of 3 new replacements. The other 2 were Eddie Kowalski and Ray Chen. We were all 19 years old. We were all terrified. We were all trying not to show it. The veterans on the boat didn't say much to us at first. They watched, evaluated, waited to see if we'd survive our first mission before bothering to learn our names. I understood. They'd learned not to get attached. Attachments hurt when people died. Our first mission was a supply run, taking ammunition and medical supplies to a marine outpost on the northern coast of Guadalcanal. Simple, routine, safe, relatively. Morrison said it was a good first mission. Get us used to operating at night. Get us used to the water. Get us used to the boat. We left at sunset. 6 PT boats in formation. running dark, no lights, no radio, navigation by compass and dead reckoning. The water was calm, the sky was clear, stars everywhere. I stood on the deck next to the starboard torpedo tube and watched the jungle slide past, dark shapes against a darker sky. It was beautiful, peaceful. I didn't know enough to be scared yet. We made the delivery without incident. The Marines were grateful. They loaded the supplies, offered us coffee, asked about news from home. They looked rough, thin, tired. Their uniforms were torn and stained. They'd been fighting for months, but they were still there, still holding the line. On the way back, we saw our first combat. Japanese destroyer, running south along the coast, probably looking for convoy targets. Morrison saw it first, called for all stop. We drifted, silent, watching. The destroyer was maybe 2 miles away, too far for our torpedoes, too big for our guns. We waited for it to pass, but it didn't pass. It turned toward us. Someone on that destroyer had spotted something. Maybe our wake, maybe a silhouette, maybe just instinct. It turned and started coming straight at us. Morrison's voice was calm. All engines ahead full. Course 180, now. The engines roared. The boat leaped forward. We ran south, full throttle. The destroyer followed. I could see the bow wave, white water in the starlight. They were faster than us in a straight line. They'd catch us eventually. Morrison made a decision. He turned hard to port, headed straight for the reef, the shallow water near the coast. The destroyer was deep draft. They couldn't follow. We could, if we were lucky, if we didn't hit the reef ourselves. If the charts were accurate, if we didn't die. The water got shallower. The boat started to buck and skip. We were doing 40 knots in water that might be 10 feet deep, or might be 5 feet deep, or might be 2 feet deep. One wrong move and we'd hit coral and tear the bottom out of the boat. We'd sink in 30 seconds. Morrison stood at the helm, watching the water, reading it, looking for the darker patches that meant deeper channels, avoiding the lighter patches that meant coral just below the surface. His hands were steady on the wheel. His voice was steady, giving orders, like we were on a training run in Rhode Island instead of running for our lives from a Japanese destroyer in the Solomon Islands. We made it through the reef. The destroyer didn't follow. It couldn't. It turned away. We'd survived our first encounter with the enemy. Nobody had fired a shot. Nobody had died. But it was real now. Combat wasn't training. Combat wasn't simulation. Combat was a Japanese destroyer trying to kill us and us running for our lives through a coral reef in the dark. When we got back to base, the veterans on our boat treated us differently. They'd seen us under pressure, seen us stay calm, seen us do our jobs. We'd earned something. Not respect yet, but acknowledgement. We existed now. We were part of the crew. That night, lying in my bunk, I realized something. I was good at this. The fear was still there, but underneath the fear was something else. Clarity, focus. When the destroyer turned toward us, when Morrison gave the order to run, when we headed for the reef, I hadn't panicked. I'd done my job, checked the weapons, secured the equipment, prepared for action. My body had known what to do, even though my mind was screaming. That's when I understood what my father had been trying to teach me. Preparation, training, repetition. Do something enough times, and your body remembers even when your mind forgets. Practice until the action becomes automatic, until you can function even when you're terrified. Over the next 6 months, we ran maybe 40 missions, supply runs, reconnaissance, escort duty, occasional surface actions against Japanese barges and small craft. We learned the boat, learned each other, learned how to operate as a crew instead of as 12 individuals. Eddie turned out to be brilliant with mechanical systems. Anything that moved, anything with parts, he could fix it, improve it, modify it. He rigged up a cooling system for the engines that increased our range by 20%. He modified the torpedo tubes so they could reload faster. He was always tinkering, always improving. Ray was our best lookout. His eyes were incredible. He could spot things in the dark that nobody else could see. Ships, aircraft, debris. He'd call them out before they appeared on radar, before anyone else noticed. He saved us more than once by spotting threats early enough to evade. Tommy Reeves was our mechanic, farm kid from Oklahoma. He'd grown up fixing tractors and trucks with whatever materials he could find. Wire, tape, hope. He kept our engines running when they should have failed, kept our guns working when they should have jammed. He was quiet, never complained, just did the work. Morrison was the best skipper in the squadron. Everyone said so. He knew the boat, knew the water, knew tactics. But more than that, he knew people. He knew how to lead without yelling, how to push without breaking, how to get the best out of his crew by trusting them, by believing in them, by showing them he believed in them. The junior officer, Jameson, was less impressive. He was competent, professional. He followed orders, but he didn't have Morrison's instinct, didn't have his feel for combat. He was by the book, which was fine for routine missions, but combat isn't routine. Combat is chaos, and chaos requires adaptation. By mid-1943, we were veterans. We'd survived, we'd learned, we'd become good at what we did, but we hadn't faced anything like what was coming. We hadn't faced the E-boats. We hadn't used the Mark 13 torpedoes. We hadn't become the Schwarze Haie yet. That didn't happen until late 1944, after we'd been transferred to the Philippines, after the brass decided to experiment with mounting submarine torpedoes on PT boats. After everything changed, the Mark 13 torpedo was designed for submarines, launched from below the waterline, heavy, powerful, reliable, but submarines were stable platforms. They fired from periscope depth. The torpedoes entered the water smoothly. The physics worked. PT boats were different, fast, maneuverable, unstable. We fired from above the waterline. The torpedoes dropped into the water, hit hard. Sometimes they'd break, sometimes they'd run erratic, sometimes they wouldn't arm properly. The physics didn't work. But somebody had the idea that if we could make it work, if we could figure out how to reliably fire submarine torpedoes from PT boats, we'd have something special. We'd have the range and power of submarine torpedoes with the speed and flexibility of PT boats. We'd be able to hunt bigger targets, destroyers, cruisers, supply ships. They picked 4 squadrons to test the concept. Squadron 77 was one of them. Morrison's boat, PT-142, was selected for the first live fire tests. That meant us. That meant we'd be the ones to figure out if this crazy idea would work or if it would just get us all killed. The first test firing was in October 1944. We were off Lady Gulf. No enemy in the area, just us and the torpedo and the ocean. Morrison took us up to 20 knots. Stable speed, calm water, everything optimal. Eddie armed the torpedo. I manned the firing mechanism. Morrison gave the order. I fired. The recoil was massive. The whole boat rolled 20 degrees to port. Water came over the side. Equipment broke loose. One of the engines stalled from the shock. We nearly capsized. The torpedo hit the water hard, broke apart, sank, failed. Morrison got us stable, got the engine restarted, got us back to base. We reported the failure. The brass weren't surprised. They'd expected problems. They told us to try again. Modify the mount, change the angle, reduce the speed, try again. We tried 17 times, 17 failures, broken torpedoes, near capsizes, equipment damage. The other crews in the squadron thought we were crazy, thought the whole project was doomed, but Morrison kept at it, and we kept at it with him. The breakthrough came from Eddie. He was studying the mount one night, running calculations on paper, thinking about the physics. He realized the problem wasn't the mount, it was the timing. We were firing when the boat was level. The recoil hit us when we were stable. That's what was causing the roll. He said, "What if we fire during a turn? What if we use the momentum of the turn to counteract the recoil?" Morrison thought about it, said, "That's insane." Eddie said, "Yeah, but it might work." Test 18. We took the boat up to 40 knots. Morrison threw us into a hard turn to starboard. Right as we reached maximum G-force in the turn, right as the boat was leaning hard to port, Eddie armed the torpedo and I fired. The recoil hit us while we were already turning. Instead of rolling us over, it helped complete the turn. The boat stayed stable. The torpedo entered the water smoothly. The propeller caught. It ran hot and straight. Hit the target buoy at 800 yards. Clean hit. Success. We'd done it. We'd figured out how to fire submarine torpedoes from PT boats, but only in a turn, only at high speed, only with perfect timing. It required precision, coordination, trust. One mistake and we'd capsize. But if we did it right, we had a weapon that could kill anything on the water. The brass loved it. They equipped all 4 squadrons with the Mark 13s. They trained the other crews using our technique. They designated us as hunter-killer boats. Our mission changed. No more supply runs, no more reconnaissance. We were going after big targets, warships, supply ships, anything that mattered. That's when we became the Schwarze Haie. Black sharks, fast, deadly, operating in the dark, getting close, killing, before the enemy knew we were there. Our first combat mission with the Mark 13s was December 1944. We'd heard reports of German E-boats operating in the area, training Japanese crews, running special operations. Intelligence said they were based somewhere in the islands north of Leyte. We were sent to find them, engage them if possible, report back either way. We found them, or they found us, or maybe we found each other. It happened fast. 3 E-boats appeared out of the darkness. They were hunting. We were hunting. We saw each other at the same moment. Morrison didn't hesitate. He called for all 4 boats to engage. PT-109 and PT-117 would be the bait. We'd be the hammer. Standard tactics. But nothing about what happened next was standard. The E-boats were faster than anything we'd faced before. 90 knots in calm water. Their engines sounded different, deeper, more powerful. They had armor plating. They had 40mm cannons. They were built to take punishment and dish it out. We were built from plywood and hope, but we had something they didn't expect. We had the Mark 13s. We had the technique. We had Morrison's instinct and Eddie's genius and Ray's eyes and Tommy's steady hands keeping those engines running no matter what. The battle started at 2300 hours, December 18th, 1944. I remember the exact time because I checked my watch when I heard the first gunfire. Force of habit. My father always said, keep track of time. Know when things start. Know when they end. Know how long you've got. PT-109 and PT-117 made their run. They came in from the north, engines screaming, making noise, making themselves targets. The E-boats took the bait. They turned to engage. Their forward guns lit up. Red tracers, green tracers, streaking across the black water. Some hit. I saw sparks on PT-109's hull, but they kept going, drawing the E-boats away from us. We waited. PT-142 and PT-131, hidden in the shadow of the island, engines at idle, barely moving, waiting for the moment, waiting for Morrison's call. The E-boats were focused on the chase. They didn't see us, didn't know we were there. They came around the southern tip of the island at full speed, 3 of them in a loose formation, maybe 300 yards from our position. Range was perfect, angle was perfect, timing was perfect. Morrison hit the throttles. The Packards roared from idle to full power in 2 seconds. The acceleration pushed me back against the torpedo tube. The deck tilted up. Water exploded off the bow. We went from 0 to combat speed faster than I thought possible. The E-boats saw us. Too late. Their guns started to swing toward us, too slow. We were already in the turn. Morrison threw the wheel hard to starboard. The boat leaned over. G-forces pulled at my stomach. Eddie had the torpedo armed. I had my hand on the firing mechanism. Fire one! Morrison's voice was calm, like we were back in training, like this was practice instead of life and death. I pulled the mechanism. The compressed air cannon fired. The torpedo launched. The recoil hit us right at the peak of the turn, exactly like Eddie had calculated. The boat stayed stable. The torpedo ran true. I watched it track across the water. Straight line. The wake was visible in the starlight, heading directly for the lead E-boat. They saw it coming. They tried to turn. Not enough time. Not enough space. Not enough luck. The explosion was tremendous. Bigger than I expected. Louder. Brighter. The E-boat disappeared in a column of water and fire. The blast wave hit us 5 seconds later. A physical push, like a giant hand shoving the boat. Equipment rattled. My ears rang. The other 2 E-boats split up. One went left, one went right. They were trying to bracket us, get us in a crossfire. Standard tactics. But Morrison was already moving. He threw us into another turn, heading straight for the E-boat that had gone right, closing distance instead of opening it, doing the opposite of what they expected. Their forward cannon opened up, 40mm rounds. I could see them coming, tracers, like slow-motion stars. Some went over us, some went under, some hit. One round struck our stern. The explosion threw Tommy into the air. He hit the deck hard, rolled, didn't get up. Eddie was screaming. I couldn't hear him over the engines and the gunfire, but I could see his face, see his mouth moving. He was pointing at Tommy, pointing at the stern, the fuel tank. We'd been hit in the fuel tank. We were leaking. We were trailing vapor. One spark and we'd explode. But there was no time to deal with it. The E-boat was maybe 100 yards away, coming straight at us. Morrison was lining up for another shot. PT-131 was engaging the 3rd E-boat. The whole area was chaos. Gunfire, explosions, boats moving at impossible speeds in impossible patterns. Fire 2! Morrison's voice again. Calm, steady, like we weren't about to die. Like this was all according to plan. I pulled the port torpedo mechanism. The launch, the recoil, the roll. We stayed stable. The torpedo ran, point-blank range, maybe 75 yards. The E-boat tried to turn. No chance. No time. The torpedo hit them midship. The explosion broke them in half. The bow section went one direction, the stern another. Men were in the water, on fire, screaming. I'd never heard sounds like that before. Didn't know humans could make sounds like that. Morrison cut our engines back. We were trailing fuel. We were damaged. Tommy was down, but we'd sunk 2 E-boats. The third one was running. PT-131 was chasing it. PT-109 and PT-117 were coming back. We'd won, somehow, against impossible odds. We'd won, but winning felt different than I thought it would. It didn't feel glorious. It didn't feel heroic. It felt necessary. It felt heavy. It felt like something that couldn't be undone. We drifted through the debris field. Parts of E-boats floating everywhere. Equipment, supplies, bodies, some dead, some alive, some in between. The water was on fire in patches where fuel had spilled. The smell was terrible. Burning fuel, burning rubber, burning flesh. Morrison looked at me. I looked at Eddie. Eddie looked at Ray. We were all thinking the same thing. The doctrine said, don't stop, don't take prisoners, don't risk your crew for the enemy, keep moving, complete the mission, go home. But there were men in the water, drowning, burning, dying, men who moments before had been trying to kill us. But now, they were just men, in the water, needing help. Morrison made the call. Get them out. 3 words. That's all. But those 3 words changed everything. Those 3 words meant we were choosing to be human instead of just soldiers. We were choosing compassion over doctrine. We were choosing to live with the memory of pulling men from the water instead of the memory of leaving them there. We pulled 3 Germans out. It took maybe 10 minutes. 10 minutes where we were sitting ducks. If more E-boats had appeared, if Japanese planes had come over, if anything had gone wrong, we'd have died. But nothing went wrong. We got them on deck. 2 were wounded. 1 was burned bad. Real bad. His skin was black and red and peeling. He was shaking, going into shock. We gave him morphine, wrapped him in blankets, did what we could. The young one, the one who looked like my brother, kept saying, "Danke," over and over. Thank you. His hands were shaking so hard he could barely hold the coffee cup we gave him. His eyes were wide, terrified, grateful, confused, all at the same time. Eddie was with Tommy. Tommy was dead. The 40mm round had hit him directly. There was nothing we could have done. Nothing anyone could have done. He was 20 years old, farm kid from Oklahoma who could fix anything, who never complained, who just did the work. He was dead before he hit the deck. We wrapped him in a tarp. Ray said a prayer. His voice was quiet, steady. He'd grown up Catholic, knew the words. I didn't know the words. I just stood there, looking at the tarp, knowing Tommy was under there, knowing he'd never go home, never see his farm again, never fix another tractor, never do anything except lie under that tarp in the bottom of a PT boat in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. The trip back to base took 4 hours. The sky got lighter, dawn came, the water turned from black to gray to blue. The Germans sat on our deck. We gave them water, coffee, cigarettes. The burned one died about an hour before we reached base. He just stopped breathing, stopped shaking, stopped being. We buried him at sea. We didn't know his name, didn't know where he was from, didn't know anything about him except he died on our boat after we pulled him from the water. Ray said another prayer. We weighted the body, slid it over the side, watched it sink into the blue water. Gone. The young one watched. He didn't cry, didn't say anything, just watched his friend disappear. Then he looked at me, right at me. His eyes were blue, exactly like my brother's eyes. He said something in German. I didn't understand the words, but I understood the meaning. Thank you for trying. Sorry we couldn't save him. Sorry for all of this. When we pulled into harbor, there were officers waiting, lots of them. Morrison went ashore to make his report. The rest of us secured the boat, cleaned the blood, fixed what we could, made a list of what needed repair. The hole in the fuel tank, the damaged stern, the spent torpedoes, the dead crew member. The 2 German prisoners were taken away by MPs. I never saw them again. Never knew what happened to them. If they survived the war, if they went home, if they told anyone about the American PT boat crew that pulled them from burning water and gave them coffee while their own dead lay 5 feet away. The news spread fast through the base. PT boat sinks 2 E-boats. First confirmed kills of German fast attack craft in the Pacific. New weapon system works. Submarine torpedoes on PT boats. The Schwarze Hai had their first success, but success felt hollow. Tommy was dead. The burned German was dead. Men I'd watched die were still dying in my head. The sounds, the smells, the sights, they didn't go away when we reached base. They didn't go away when the officers congratulated us. They didn't go away at all. Morrison found me that evening. I was sitting on the dock, smoking, watching the sunset. He sat down next to me. Didn't say anything for a while. Just sat. Smoked his own cigarette. Watched the sun with me. Finally he said, "First time?" I said yes. He said, "It never gets easier. Every time you think it will, it doesn't. You just learn to carry it better." I asked him how many men he'd seen die. He thought about it. Said, "I stopped counting after 20. That was a year ago. Probably twice that now. Maybe more. I don't know. I don't want to know." I asked him if he thought we'd done the right thing. Pulling the Germans out. He said, "I don't know if it was right, but it was human. That's got to count for something."